Alderman Sullivan.
Here.
Alderman Clemmons.
Here.
Alderman Senate.
Here.
Alderman Jettie.
Here.
Alderman Tebow.
Here.
Alderman Clee.
Here.
Alderman Dowd.
Present.
Alderwoman Kelly.
I'm here. I'm attending via Zoom because I am out of the city and I am alone in this room.
Alderman Wilshire.
I'm here.
14 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Also joining us this evening is Mayor Jim Donchis and Corporation Counsel Steve Bolton. Business unfinished at previous meeting. Alderman O'Brien.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Business unfinished at previous meeting.
Do we have the scripts?
You have a script?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't receive.
Oh,
Sorry about that, Madam
all right.
President. Okay. Oh, thank you. Sorry about that, Madam President. I would like to motion to take from the table R25-121, and it would have to be by roll call, please.
Motion is to take from the table. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien.
Yes.
Alderwoman Timmons.
Yes.
Alderman Thibodeau.
Yes.
Alderman Govea.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yes.
Alderman Senate.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman Tebow.
Yes.
Alderman Clee.
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire.
Yes.
14 yeas, 0 nays.
That motion carries. I'm going to allow the Attorney Bolton to talk about what's changed since the last time we met on this piece of legislation, if you would.
Thank you. You'll recall some months ago now, we had meetings, at least a couple meetings on this proposal, and 2 amendments were made at the most recent meeting, which have been incorporated in the latest draft. One of them was to change the inflation factor from relying on the implicit price deflative for state and local purchasers to the consumer price index. So that change is incorporated. Another one was that the override vote could not occur more than 5 times in any fiscal year. And you can see that down in section 56-CD. Additionally, there was a lot of discussion about what the inflation factor should be applied to. And previously it included items that were outside of the city's control and outside of what we raised locally in taxes. So we've pared that down, and you can see this in prior years' local property tax levy definition, and we're talking about the dollar amount of the prior year's municipal tax effort and local education tax effort. And these figures we receive each year from the Department of Revenue Administration. So that is a further change. I also made a change to make it explicit in the projected other revenues definition that included the funds we would anticipate receiving from the statewide education property tax, sometimes called SWEPT. This is revenue we get. It's an added tax rate for this tax that is added to the other categories of tax rates, the municipal, local education, and county, and the city receives that revenue and expends that revenue. So making it clear that that is included in the definition of other revenues, which are all other revenues that are not raised by local property tax. So those are the changes in this draft from what you've seen at previous meetings.
Madam President? Well, given some recent events, there's a part of this that I think that could be added that is not. And that is, there is no provision in the tax cap as proposed that would allow or compensate within the calculation the loss of federal or state funds. Now, I think when we first proposed this, Alderman Clemmons and I back in February, maybe, you know, the stream of federal and state funds for many years had been very reliable. And rarely, if ever, were there cuts, and mostly we could, if anything, count on possibly, you know, an addition. But now, for example, the school department believes they might be cut by $2 or $3 million in various title education aid, not Title I, but some of the other titles. Title I could come later. And without the ability to, without a provision that allows a compensation for the cut in federal funds, what could happen is if the federal fund cut offset the entire, as an example, a federal fund cut offsets the entire amount of increase in the budget that would support a tax increase up to the cap, you could end up with having to cut services drastically to offset this federal or state cut. And so, in my opinion, we should include a provision that would allow us to, within the calculation, to offset a loss of federal or state aid with a local contribution, if we wanted to, without including that increase in the calculation. Is that clearer? Maybe not.
Clear as mud.
Well, should I try to explain it further?
Sure, a little bit.
Well, all right, this is a tax cap, not a budget cap, but it's tied to the budget. So, speaking in sort of general terms, if you wanted, if everything was neutral, and if you'll see from Mr. Griffin's calculations, it really isn't, but if everything were neutral and you increased the budget by 3% and your cap were 3%, you would get a 3% tax increase matching the cap. However, if the, and you would be able to maintain the same level of service across all of our departments, school, fire, police, everything. On the other hand, if a federal cut came which equaled that 3% that would be allowed under the cap, which would be reduced by 3%, an amount equal to the 3% that the increase that would offset the budget increase that would support a cap level increase in the tax rate, then you would need to use all of your cap space to replace the federal money. And you would see no increase in actual in the level of the budget. So you would have to cut services by 3% to meet the 3% tax cap. The budget is $100 million. Let's say you could go up 3%. Okay, so you need that to maintain the constant level of services. And that would increase the taxes by 3%. But if you got a $3 million cut in federal funds, Now, you would need to raise the tax rate by 3% in order just to offset the loss of $3 million of federal funds. So you would entirely use up the cap space, you would increase the tax rate by 3%, but you would see no increase in the service. You would need to basically flat all the budgets to make sure you were under the cap. And a flat budget, when there are raises, when there are contracts, things like that, would mean a very, very severe loss in services. So if the cap were to include an amendment which suggested that a loss of federal or state funds below the previous year could be offset by local funds, then that kind of debilitating effect could be neutralized. No?
I know Alderwoman Kelly's had her hand up. Go with her first.
Thank you, and thank you for the mayor for the question. It was very similar to my question. I don't have a stake either way, whether this goes on the ballot, but my concerns were around funding being cut. And then perhaps maybe to Don or to Attorney Bolton, my question was around the actual budget season. Oftentimes we approve a budget and then there's a time in which other calculations come in. So how would we handle that, right? So we just had the county budget. It was going to go up a ton, but then that got changed. So how do we account for that sort of when we approve it and then all the other factors that go into the tax rate?
Well, we have that problem every year with or without this change. If there is space under the budget limitation, the cap, it may be that you want to make a supplemental appropriation to deal with that contingency. It may be that you don't. The county budget, we don't have to really be concerned with, other than it affects our citizens and it raises their taxes. So, of course, that's a concern of ours, but there's nothing we can do about that other than lobby our state representatives. But we also don't have to do anything more about it, because the county budget will be set. The amount of money that the county needs to have available to it will be determined by the State Department of Revenue Administration. The share to be provided by each community within Hillsborough County will be determined by the Department of Revenue Administration, and the DRA will communicate to each city and town in Hillsborough County the amount that has to be included as the county tax rate added to the municipal, local school, and the statewide education property tax rate to make the total rate that our homeowners and property taxpayers will see on their bill. So that is automatic without the Board of Aldermen or anyone else taking any action to deal with the county taxes. But certainly other things happen. Typically, the Board of Aldermen approves a budget in late May or late June, somewhere in that time period. The federal government could, at any time, apparently, cancel programs, eliminate grants, decide that grants that had been given in previous years will not be given. So what we projected in May or June for the entire coming fiscal year might be pulled out from us, as I said, anytime, but certainly after, even after the tax rate is set. So October, November, the following February. And as I said, the Board of Aldermen can adjust to that if there's space under the cap by a supplemental appropriation, or can adjust to it by determining what services that used to be funded by that grant will no longer be funded. Not as drastically, but similarly, at the state level, similar things can happen. We're even now getting the impacts of what the state is done with the state's budget, which only recently passed. And what that actually means in terms of dollars and cents is only now becoming known. So whereas you folks passed a budget a month ago, that was based on certain anticipations, which may not come to fruition at this point. You have to deal with that as best you can, and I imagine if drastic measures are necessary, you'll be consulting various department heads on where there are savings to be had, or where there are not, or what more is going to be necessary in order to provide the same level of service. And that all will be true whether or not any charter amendment is made.
You all set, Alderman Kelly?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think I had Alderman Lopez.
So if only one of us around this horseshoe had sort of anticipated unstable federal funding and kind of voted against it every single time because of that, I think there is definitely that potential instability, as the mayor had mentioned. I know there's a lot of concern about how we were going to maintain the after-school programs when, as a matter of public policy, funding for that came into question. And I know we've met multiple times about how the public transportation system is heavily reliant on federal funds, even with additional allocations. And so those are dangers, and I think those are examples of what the mayor is pointing out, that, I mean, if those funds do get cut from any programs that are like that, citizens would notice, and employers would notice, and parents would notice, and it could be very problematic. And then we'd have to discuss it here in the chamber as a debate as to whether or not those services should continue. And we're going to see the same kind of, I guess, confrontation between needs that we typically do, where people say, oh, well, what about me? Like, why should, quote, the taxpayers pay for something that, when they're really saying that, they're not acknowledging that anybody that they disagree with is a taxpayer. And it could cause a lot of contention among our residents if we see major changes in funding from Washington. So I can see the value of it. I am concerned that if we create an automated process, or we just create a provision for calculation, then whatever Washington does is just going to increase taxes here. And I think it would be important for the aldermen to evaluate any budget. So, I mean, such a provision, if we did look at doing that, Mr. Mayor, were you contemplating maybe, okay, we need to enact this emergency measure and confirm it? Or how do you, I mean, or do you want to just bake it into the calculation?
I think you bake it into the calculation. So thinking about this, if the budget were 100 million, and that consisted of 97 million local, 3 million federal. Again, this is a tax cap, but the tax rate is driven by the budget. So speaking simply, if you increase the budget by 3%, you increase the tax rate by 3%. In the example that I've just given, there was 97 million local dollars being spent. So if you went to 103 million with the federal money, you would be increasing your local expenditure by from 97 to 100, and you would have the $3 million of federal money, and you would be able to meet your 3% budget. But were the federal funds cut, you would only be able, because the budget is tied to because the tax rate is tied to the budget, you would only be able to increase the local share of this from 97 to 100, a 3% increase. The $3 million of federal money would not be there. So to comply with the cap, you could not go over $100 million. which would equal the previous year's budget, which in the previous year included local and state, and then the year I'm speaking about would be only local. And so you would end up with a flat budget. The cap would, again, the budget, the tax rate is tied to the budget. So you would end up with a flat budget that would increase taxes by 3%. And I think you all know what a flat budget would do. You would have maybe 3% revenue, maybe you'd have 3% labor contracts in place. You would need to cut the workforce by 3% to hit the cap because of the loss of federal money. So what I'm suggesting is that Attorney Bolton write a provision into the proposed tax cap that would enable, in that situation, an adjustment to be made in the calculation to allow the Board of Aldermen, without exceeding the cap, if they wished, to offset the loss of federal funds with local funds.
All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, I think so.
I had Alderman Tebow next.
Thank you, Madam President. So, I came into this, I supported the tax cap right along. I believe the spending cap has been ill-advised over the last 35 years or 30 years, whenever it was put in. It was used by other boards in the past to be able to not do the things they need to do in the city. And that's why we're at points now where we got to fix 2 garages at one time. That's why we had to put a 10-year paving program in. And so we've seen over recent years that we've had to do a supplemental appropriations over that to help with some of this infrastructure that's been an issue. So I've been against keeping the spending cap the way it is. But that being said, I've been thinking about this all week, and with the federal issues, I don't know if I could support this tonight in its present form, just because of the reasons the mayor says. And I don't want to get us into a certain circumstance where the tax cap is worse. Where I was under the impression the tax cap would be better for the city and for the citizens. And if that doesn't work out right now the way it is, then I don't want to vote for that. So I'm looking for something better. I'm not looking for something that's going to be more hurtful to either the city or to the citizens, or both, obviously. I would want it to be a benefit to both. So right now, I would probably vote no tonight on that. Thank you.
Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you. So I understand the problem you're describing, Mayor, but, I see there are 2 ways of handling it. One is your way. The other is that, the way the proposal reads right now, we have the right to override the cap. So if there was a dire situation where federal or state money was taken away from us, we've recently learned about this thing called rescission, where the federal government gives you money and then they take it away. If that happens, we could override this budget limitation. But, the proposal that you're suggesting, I take it the way you've talked, you don't have the language prepared for us tonight? You're not ready to go ahead with this tonight? Is that true?
Well, I agree with the 2 alternatives you just laid out. Yes, to incorporate this, we would need to have this drafted, and it would need to come back to us. I mean, the reality is, we may not be able to get this on the budget this year anyway. This needs to go to Concord and back by, a public hearing to Concord and back by September, early September?
September 5th.
Right. So you got to have a public hearing, send it to Concord, get an answer from the AG's office in August, and have it back by September 5th. It may not even happen, even if this were to go forward and you schedule a public hearing right now. So I'm suggesting that, yes, we draft an amendment, that we try to do something that works well rather than just rush, it forward, that we propose, that Attorney Bolton draft an amendment and bring it back to the Board of Aldermen.
Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. Still trying to process, but just to Alderman Jetti's point, the override provision, which we have 5 of them, wouldn't take care of this problem? Because it's not, if I understand what you're saying, and the way you've explained it, Attorney Bolton, is we're not worried about running out of money. We're just worried about going over the cap. Am I correct in that assumption?
Well, you can only spend what you appropriate. And without an override, you can only appropriate up to the limitation that's described in whatever passes. So you could end up, if you did not alter your programming, you could run out of money before the fiscal year ended. I mean, we would still have plenty of money in the bank in fund balance, but we would not have the legal ability to spend it.
Follow-up? Thank you. Okay. So under the scenario that you laid out would be short maybe $2 to $3 million in that scenario. And if let's say we pass the budget in June, and we find out in September that there's a shortfall of $2 million, we've only appropriated up to a certain amount, we could override it to take care of that, but then the concern might be later on in the year that we might run out of money for something else, because we used $2 million out of a certain fund, because we have to keep that fund at a certain level, so we can't dip into it too much. And then your concern is maybe we get into the latter half of the fiscal year, we might run out of money because we gave it to that program that was short funded by federal money. I'm just trying to understand where all this this is is going.
I think Attorney Bolton and I are talking about two different circumstances.
Okay.
The one I'm talking about is when we pass the budget, we're aware of a cut that's come down and are trying to deal with it in the budget we're looking at. I think Attorney Bolton is talking about a situation in which we assume we're going to get federal money. We pass the budget based upon that assumption, and then that money gets cut. And I believe, but he could correct me, so I think he's talking about what happens if we learn after the budget passes that there's a cut, and how does that get handled?
Yeah, I think I was just trying to answer what I understood the question to be, which seemed to be more in that scenario. So do we have a danger of running out of money? Well, that was a scenario where that danger could exist.
Right.
But
Okay.
it could also exist, as you posit, Mayor, a budget gets passed in June, and the revenue calculation assumed some dollar amount in federal and state grants, and it might not be $3 million. We might be talking $20 million. But whatever the number is, if we find out that that money is not coming in after the budget passed, before the budget passed, presumably if you know before the budget, then that is where, if there's a provision that calculated that into the cap limitation, the Board of Aldermen would be in a position to handle that without an override. But if it's afterwards, depends on how close to the limitation the budget already was.
Just one more follow-up. So under our current cap situation, our current budget, as long as we're under the cap, and if we're, I don't know, I forgot where we are now. Let's say we have 20 million to go in the cap, and we found out that there was a shortfall of $2 million. We just supplementally appropriate that $2 million to make up for the shortfall, and then now we're 18 million under the cap. All right, that's kind of how it goes right now. Seems to be pretty
If that
simple.
were the case, yes.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Thanks.
Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, just to cover both sides of the coin. If the state all of a sudden now determines that they want to comply with a court order of state educational funding, and we get a windfall of money from the state, how does that factor into the budget? Do we have to accept the additional revenue? How does that? how
Would
does
we
that-
want to?
If we want to? Yeah, right, like we're going to turn down,
Right, if, and I would not hold my breath on this.
I wouldn't either, but I just.
If the state decided to comply with the existing court order to adequately fund education, again, it depends when you know that. If it's before you pass the budget, presumably that would come into, under this new scenario, that would come into your projected other revenues. And that being the case, it would provide you with that much of an increase in the cap, because that's money from other than local property taxes. So you could appropriate to spend that money from that other source. If you find that out afterwards, well, that's still good news. You would have to appropriate it. If that puts you over the cap in this new scenario, frankly, in the old scenario, the problem is that there's no override provision in the current charter language. But I suspect somehow we would find a way to enable us to spend the money we get. Very often, if it was that sort of a windfall, we wouldn't spend it all, and some of it might be used to reduce taxes. And frankly, the last time anything similar happened, which was way back in the 1990s, we had a windfall where, I think it was 91, might have been later than that, might have been 93 or 94, we got an influx of about 25 million, where the previous year it had been less than 1 million in state education aid. And we bought down the tax rate with about half of that, put about half of that into fund balance, and drew it down over time to help pay off the bonds for the new high schools. So those kinds of options would exist if suddenly we were to get an extra 30 or 40 million dollars. Again, don't hold your breath.
Yeah.
Well, okay. What's the pleasure of the board? Oh, Alderman O'Brien, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I was a member of the New Hampshire State Legislature when former Alderman Fred Team Boom bought this current, what we're living under. It was the most ridiculous thing I ever saw. It was the saddest day in the history of my public life. I'll tell you why. Former Alderman T. Boone took the sovereignty of the New Hampshire voter and turned it into a bipartisan, well, a political issue, to one party, the Republican Party. It was introduced into the Senate via one of our two state representatives, this state senator. This senator has, I think, only one ward in the city. Maybe it was a 3? Okay, stand corrected, a 3. But not the majority of the city. But he didn't care about the 3, in my opinion. What he did is he wrote this. Now, you got to look at the gerrymandering from that particular party, because that Senate district goes all up and through into Republican-type communities. That's shameful, but that's another issue that needs to be addressed. But what about the sovereignty of the Nashua taxpayers? The right way to do it would have been the way that Alderman T. Boone did it in the beginning. Go out there, get petitions, get it signed, bring it in, and then we decide whether to put it onto the ballot or not. But that wasn't done. He had the good people of Bartlett, Lancaster, Berlin, everywhere else vote for it. I'm proud to say New Hampshire's 28 representatives in the House voted against it, and so did Senator Cindy Rosenwald. But the House didn't listen to the pleas of the national representatives who live with this. So I see this as a political football. It does nothing. I worked under the spending cap. I wonder if anybody else here was employed by the city who worked under the spending cap. As captain of a fire station, I had to call up sometimes other stations and say, do you have extra toilet paper? Because the budget ran down. And I would put in a plea, can I get some toilet paper? No, you can't. The money's tapped out, and that usually happened about mid-June, the Ides of June. This is what a spending cap does. You look at our roads. Why are we spending approximately, what, $2 million a year to fix roads? Why, our roads we had an earthquake and they just fell apart? No, they did not. But we did have a spending cap. The spending cap is what caused our roads to be in decay. Now, what caused our 2 parking garages that were aforementioned into disrepair? Their age, yes. Out in extreme weather conditions, yes, this is New England. But the other thing was, because of the spending cap, we did not take care of them. If they were on your property, that is something that, your house would fall down around your ears. And let's look at the Hunt Building, the former library, because we didn't fix some glass issues around the windows, caused great damage to that building. So a lot of things really suffer here with and under a potential spending cap. Yet, good forefathers, the guys with the 3-corner hats, had the best spending cap in the past, and that was called elections. If the good people out there don't like what you're doing, then vote me out. That's your right. I'm a big boy and I could take it. But if you like what I'm doing, vote me in. But the thing is, I don't need to put a noose around my neck tied to a miller's wheel and throw it off the bridge, because that, to me, is what a spending cap does. Now, I don't like the fact that it's mentioned like in the old spending cap. I watched many in the past municipal meetings. Some of my colleagues, 1 or 2, have been here when the spending cap pre-existed. And you need 10 votes, a supermajority. That's a super penalty. Should never be a supermajority to override the cap. It should be just a simple majority. Why make it harder? If the thing stinks, why do you want to make it harder on yourself? We need to, if anything that comes out of this, we need to eliminate the 10 votes to override. Now, you see, somebody might have business, somebody may not be in town, somebody may be sick. I was sick a while back. That depletes from the 10 votes. And that's taken away from people who demand and want representation. We're not doing a fair job by having that in this. And I have to agree. I think the federal government is in shambles. Right now, we're going to have tariffs or no tariffs. We're going to tariff somebody 50%, 30%, 10%. God only knows. But things are going to get explosive around here. And then again, if we have a spending cap, we could start seeing things kind of affect us. I think we all have good head on our shoulders. We don't need this spending cap. You know what we need? We need to do our jobs. And we need to be prudent. And maybe with a little bit of conservatism, look at each item that comes before us. Do we really need that lawnmower for park rec? Yes, we do. Okay. Approve it. I think if we used our common sense that we all were issued to when we were born, then why rely on a mechanism that's got to do and replace your sense of common sense? So I think if we're prudent, we can do it. We don't need this, and thus, I am not going to support this. I think it would be, like I say, a way to reel around our neck. And I can think. Thank you.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Madam President. To Attorney Bolton, the current, obviously we're voting for this as the tax cap. The current spending cap that we have does not allow for overrides, correct?
Correct.
The way that the legislation went at the State House, the way it was rewritten and everything doesn't allow us to do any kind of overrides, so.
It has provisions to exclude certain things from the calculation
Right.
if the Board of Aldermen allows that by 10 votes. But those exclusions are not an override.
Right.
They are sometimes wrongly called an override, but they are not. And that's been decided by the New Hampshire Supreme Court. So that is true. The current spending cap, budget limitation provisions of the charter have proven in recent years to be workable. I don't know if what's before us tonight will or will not prove to be workable.
So what we have in front of us is actually the tax cap and not a spending cap. And while I have some issues with the spending cap, and I have spoken about that, because it doesn't take into considerations revenues, or what I refer to as money that does not affect the tax rate. It doesn't take any of that into consideration. I've been for a tax cap from the day that I've spoken about it, because that did take that into consideration, and it did allow for a 10-vote supermajority override. But because this does get impacted by a federal government or a state government that could willy-nilly take away money that's given, I have anxiety about that. So I can't support something to this nature. I understand what the mayor is saying, but at the same time, I'm fearful that we suddenly start putting provisions in, and it's almost like not having the cap at all. And I'm also afraid that we're going to suddenly start putting this in with all these provisions, and we're going to confuse the voter as to what we want and so on, and it becomes very, very confusing. I'm not sure whether or not this is something that we really do want to put in front of the voters. I don't like the spending cap as it is. I think there's some changes that need to be done to it. I almost rather see changes to the spending cap put forward than to put this through. So I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not comfortable with this as written, and I think it's because of the craziness that's happening up in the federal government, and actually some of the craziness that's happening in our state government. I think they've proven that it's not stable there, and because of that instability, I think a tax cap is, and the way that actually the provisions that happened up in the State House, I don't think we can put this forward. So, just my opinion.
Okay, I have 5 people, so. Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam President. So, just to go back to Alderman O'Brien's comments, that state senator that voted so poorly against this city is now going national with the fact that we are all here selling Penachuk, and yet not all of us are going out there saying that's not true. So just keep in mind, that state senator does not care about this city. But at the end of the day, I think there needs to be some more work on this bill, and I think I don't think it's ready for prime time. I don't think it's ready to go in front of the public or on the ballot. And if the mayor has some things he wants to work out with the city staff that's going to better this based on what's going on at the federal level, then I think I would like to put a motion in to table it.
Your motion is to table? Motion is to table. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Alderman O'Brien.
Yes.
Alderwoman Timmons.
Yes.
Alderman Thibodeau.
No.
Alderman Govea.
No.
Alderman Lopez.
No.
Alderman Sullivan.
No.
Alderman Clements.
No.
Alderman Senate.
No.
Alderman Jettie.
No.
Alderman Tebow.
Yes.
Alderman Clee.
No.
Alderman Dowd.
No.
Alderwoman Kelly.
No.
Alderman Wilshire.
No.
3 yeas, 11 nays.
Motion fails. Okay, so next up, we had Alderman Jettie.
So, thank you. So I think what, where we're at now, I think, and through you to Corporation Counsel, I think there are several changes to the resolution which you've suggested, which we have not yet voted on. I don't think we've voted on all of your suggestions. Well, they're not your suggestions, but what you've interpreted our suggestions to be. So tonight, we can either, vote on those changes that we have before us, one by one, and see what we end up with. And then I suppose we could either, there's been some sentiment that, some people don't want this at all, so I guess we could, after we amend it, we could then vote on it, up or down. And then there's the possibility that, the mayor wants to, has suggested that there be an additional amendment that would have to be sent back to Corporation Counsel. And I think, on that point, maybe a renewed motion to table might be in order. I think I know I voted against tabling it because I didn't think everybody had had a chance to say what they had to say. So I'm usually voting against tabling until everybody's had a chance to speak. And so that's why I voted against it this time. So Attorney Bolton, am I correct? Are there, the copy that that has been placed on our tables tonight contain changes which we've not yet voted on, is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And is there someone that's knowledgeable about each one of those that could make motions to?
The simple way to do it would be to amend the resolution in its entirety by substituting therefore the copy that has been provided to you today.
Okay. So I guess to move things along, I would make that motion.
Okay. Discussion on that motion, Alderman Clements. You haven't had a chance to speak this evening.
Thank you, Madam President. So this is relevant to the motion. I believe early on in our discussions on this, I asked the question to Attorney Bolton if the spending cap could be amended as opposed to basically recreating the wheel and doing this. And so I'm going to ask that question again. Can the spending cap be amended instead of doing a tax cap?
Yes, the same procedure to amend the charter could be used.
So, yeah, with that being said, you know, hearing the discussions tonight, you know, and also, you know, I think from my own perspective, having lived through the last, I don't know, many months since January 20th, and seeing the chaos that has come down from Washington, D.C. and Concord onto us in various forms and ways, I don't think that, you know, when this was originally being worked on, did I have any anticipation of any of that happening at all? Where, you know, the city would be potentially losing millions upon millions of dollars in grants, being able, you know, having to be able to navigate some of that stuff, plus, you know, just where the economy may go because of some of the decisions that are being made. So, you know, I tend to agree with my colleagues that given the situation that we are in right now, as opposed to even where we were in April, the last time we discussed this, it might be prudent to put this on the table and maybe think about, or just rejecting it outright and maybe going back and recreating, making some amendments to the spending cap to better tie that to the tax rate, as opposed to doing this. And I don't know what those differences would really be, because when doing the research and the discussion was limited to the tax cap legislation and not necessarily the spending cap, and the spending cap is unique to Nashua. So there wasn't anything else to look at across the state. You know, you couldn't compare it to like Manchester or something like that. So I think knowing what we know, and I've said this before on other referendums, that we shouldn't put something forward to the voters unless it's ready for prime time. And I tend to agree that this is not ready for prime time. I don't know whether or not I'm going to support Alderman Jetty's motion, or if I'm more inclined to just reject this outright and start from scratch. But I'll listen to the debate and decide later on. But either way, I don't think this is ready to go forward tonight.
Alderman Senate.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd be comfortable supporting Alderman Jetty's motion to accept the amendment with the revisions that we have in front of us, solely because, and I've mentioned this before in previous meetings where we've taken up things that have been tabled for a long time, kind of lose sight of what's in front of us. This is the most current copy, but I think many of us have been reviewing. I think it's good, one way or the other, what we decide here tonight, to be deciding based on probably what most of us have been reading this week or today. Long term, I tend to agree. I feel as we consider this and we take into consideration some of the things that have occurred, nationally since the last time we even discussed this. I feel like we're standing on a shaky bridge. There's a lot of uncertainty with each step that we take. And I'm hesitant to go forward with something with that level of uncertainty, because I feel, as we delve long-term into the past, uncertainty is what gotten us here in the first place. Interpretation, confusion, what falls under the cap, what doesn't. At the bare minimum, at least, if we don't get this going this year, we have a system in place that I think we have a pretty comfortable understanding of. Is it perfect? No. I'd be more inclined to work with Alderman Clemens or anybody who else would want to jump on board with maybe making some of those revisions that have been bandied about tonight regarding the spending cap that we have in place, not to dissect it or break it apart entirely, but moreover just to add further clarity. I think that's what we're in constant pursuit of here, is clarity and understanding. And so with that, I'm happy to amend so that we're at least voting forward or disposing of the most recent revision, but I don't think long-term I would be comfortable putting this further than that tonight. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, I agree with all what my colleagues have said. I actually agree with what Alderman Lodge O'Brien said, that the ultimate challenge is electing people that reflect what the majority of the people in the city want. I also think that it's not unreasonable to have some limitations on spending, but I think to do that, you've got to have a piece of legislation that is solid. I don't think the spending cap legislation was solid at all. I think from the discussion I've heard this evening, I don't think this is ready for prime time. I would agree with Alderman Jetties just to get the first step, getting this on the table as an amended piece of legislation. At the current time, I wouldn't be in favor of approving it. I'd rather we took our time and make sure that we pass a piece of legislation that we can live with long-term. We've got to take into account that we can't have any idea what the heck the state and the federal government are going to do to us. And, we've been voted one of the best-run cities in the country and one of the safest cities. I don't want to jeopardize that. And I don't want us to tie our hands so that we can't keep those things current. And so, but I want to make sure that if we do pass legislation, that it's something that we all feel comfortable with. And I don't think we're there yet. But I would agree to get this on the table with the amendments, because that's sort of putting the piece of marble with the original cuts in it, and then we can chip away to get to where we want to go. The other thing is, when you put a piece of legislation like this on the ballot, I would say a majority of people that vote on it won't have a clue what they're voting on. And things have been approved in the past that nobody knows why it was approved. So, then you get into a partisan bickering back and forth with voters as to, it's like the Chinese buying the water company, for God's sake.
Which they didn't, just to clarify.
It's crazy, and I don't want to get into that with this legislation. So I think the legislation needs to be solid. And I think there are things that were brought up tonight that we haven't considered, and I think we need to consider it so that we have an ability to deal with it. I don't think we ever have a problem going through our budget with the actual spending we do locally on police, fire, schools and stuff. It's the grants and the other monies, because I can tell you, the police and fire department can't operate without their grants. They don't get the grants, something's going to happen. I mean, if you're familiar with all the grants that they get, same thing with public health, same thing with the schools. There are a bunch of grants that we rely on. We have to be able to address those in whatever legislation we finally approve. so that we don't cause the city of Nashua to degrade in a way we don't want it to degrade.
Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Madam President. Before us, what we have, I mean, I could really go either way on it, because we have something there right now. If we want to take our time and look at other options, I don't think there's anything bad with that at all. I know we were just talking because of the essence of time of trying to get something done this year, but if the flavor is not, and we just need to study more and say, all right, is this the way we want to go, or is revamping the spending cap the way we want to go, I think that's perfectly fine. We just need to reset our timetable. I mean, I find, the odds of us bringing up the spending cap and amendments to that before January, when a new board gets inaugurated, very slim, and I think that's fine as well. This could be something that the next board looks at in depth, and at the end of the day, if they say, all right, we looked at the spending cap, there's not much we can do to it, well, you at least have some bones of a potential tax cap that you could go off of. So I don't think the comparing and contrasting the two is a bad idea, and I'm all fine if we need further discussion on this, because at the end of the day, we want people to be comfortable with it. We don't really want to force this down people's throats. So if we need to debate more and really go through it with a fine-tooth comb come next January and the next term of aldermen, then that's perfectly fine by me.
Alderman Thibodeau.
Thank you, Madam President. A few things, and the current administration decide at the state level and at the federal level, the same item of concern was always there. It may be happening now, but when you give up the local control, this is what could ultimately happen. Hasn't happened before, but it's happening now. And now it's making people nervous. A few months back, this probably would have gone through quickly, just as it's written, and probably made it to the ballot. Did not, but could have. The question came up tonight about making amendments to the spending cap. And just because I can't remember the date, when did, through you to Attorney Bolton, the spending cap, when was that initiated?
Early 1990s.
Early 90s. So I find it interesting that it's taken this long before that conversation has ever come up.
Well, it's been amended 2 or 3 times since then. It's been subject to varying interpretations and court decisions. So it's not like it was put in place 30-some-odd years ago when everyone agreed and it's worked fine since then. There's been a lot of struggle over the decades.
Understood. One of the questions brought up by Alderman Clemmons was can we? So being the fact that it was levied on us through the state, what are the limitations and the parameters by that levying by the state that narrow what we can make amendments to?
Well, it is a provision, it's a group of sections in our city charter. One of the court cases basically rendered it unenforceable. State legislation, and it was unenforceable because it did not comply with mandatory requirements for tax or spending caps in state law. The state then changed those mandatory requirements, or more precisely, they said, well, if your tax or spending cap had been enacted before a certain date, it was 2010 or 2011, then you don't have to be in compliance with those mandatory provisions of state law. And that sort of revived the spending cap as it exists within the charter. And that was the state legislation that I believe Alderman and one-time former, many-time Representative O'Brien was speaking about, that passed without any of the Nashua representatives voting for it. So, all that is by way of saying, we don't have to be overly concerned. Well, let me say, if we were to amend the charter by the provisions allowed, which is the same as what is described in the analysis section of the legislation that's before you, that same process could occur. Again, we would have to comply with what the state law now requires, because once we enact something new, that provision that grandfathered things enacted before 2011 would not be applying to what new provisions we might enact if we wanted to amend those sections which have been collectively referred to as the spending cap.
All set?
Yep.
Next, I have Alderman Lopez and then Alderman O'Brien.
So I will definitely support the amendment. This was introduced at the beginning of this year, and at that time it was presented that there was plenty of time to address it. For my part, I just want to comment that I had been working on something with Treasurer Enright that was similar in concept, and I mistook it. So I think I was inadvertently disrespectful to all the work that Attorney Bolton did in making what we have before us. But it was much more well thought out, and I thought it was much more effective in addressing the primary issues we talk about every time we do the budget. We talk about how the spending cap is a broken concept, and we're focusing on the spending, and we're not focusing on what the taxpayers and public commenters are specifically pointing to, is that we focus our restrictions on spending rather than taxing. And that at the time, there was a lot of opportunity that was being pointed to for grants and for private donations and other revenue generating that the spending cap would ultimately defeat anyway. So I think the value of having this change in approach is, at least to me, self-evident. And I would like to think that it could be to the or to the voting population. I am always reluctant to just say, oh, I don't want to put something before the voters because they won't understand it. They'll be confused by it. Sure, that's happened a couple of times, but largely they do follow issues, and it becomes a major talking point whenever people are running for re-election. And most of the people who have spoken tonight are up for re-election, so would be able to reach out to their constituents, explain the issue, make sure that the people who are supporting their candidacy also understand what their candidacy would be doing and how they would be executing it. So I think that's important to remember. I also think that while it is important not to rush something through, I don't know if this qualifies as rushed, and I don't even know what it looks like if we're taking our time, because this sat on the table for a long time after we had the public hearings, after it went to committee, and when we all collectively discussed this last time, we apparently said we were going to come here, roll up our sleeves, get the whole board together, and really hash this out. And it seems like where the rubber meets the road, people aren't quite ready to hash it out. I do definitely agree that it needs to be thoughtfully constructed, that the mayor's concerns do have a lot of merit, and that we need to address those. But I also think we came here to work, and there's never going to be an ideal time to do this. And at least from the discussion tonight, I don't know that the proposed tax cap, if the people of Nashua do decide to endorse it, would do any more harm than the spending cap would, because we're still going to be looking at a major issue with federal dollars suddenly being shifted, unexpectedly. That will be a crisis at any point, and to previous speakers' points, we will have to do our jobs at that point. But I think we should also be doing our jobs right now. And if we have an amendment before us which improves or moves us closer to a resolution, we should be looking at it. And I also think that even though it's a tight deadline, we should try to put this before the voters if we can for this election, because the implications are it doesn't go before the voters before this election, and so it doesn't get changed for the next budget year. And so it goes, or even the one after, I guess, it goes to the ballot the next time we have a citywide election, which is next year. So I think we need to do as much work as we can on this, and I think if people are saying, well, we need to take our time and we need to be deliberate and we need to really, make sure we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, then they also need to be willing to put the time into making that happen, making further amendments, making recommendations, having this discussion, because it would be very tempting to just table this right now and then try not to think about it until after elections, or to amend it and then table it and still do the same thing. But the truth is, we're going to come to the budget season again. Everyone's going to fall back on the spending cap is broken, but we have an opportunity to work on it. We should be working on this. I think this is one of the biggest priorities that we should be facing right now is how are we budgeting our city? And I don't want it to get lost in the shuffle, that if we're able to more accurately make our ordinances reflect our intent, then we can also more effectively communicate to people what we're doing with budgeting, which ideally would make it less confusing, less concerning, and less prone to misinformation and confusion. I think this is a very important effort. I appreciate the work that's gone into it. I'll support the amendment, and just because we're on a tight deadline, I don't think that means we should just say, oh, well, I guess if it didn't happen tonight, then it can't happen. I think we should still try to do something. And I would point out that anybody who has argued that, well, maybe what we should really be doing is looking at amending the spending cap instead of looking at putting this on the ballot, we'd still have to do that process. We'd still have to put it as a referendum because it would be a charter amendment. So no effort's been done on that. It won't get us anywhere faster. I think this conceptually is stronger than what we've had in the past, and I will at least support the amendment, and I probably would support any reasonable recommendations made tonight.
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. I have to strongly disagree with my colleague who has just spoken. I don't tear down a house I just painted. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Alderman Jettie made a fair amendment that I think on another day I very much could support. But I think in a way we are throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We've seemed to have, in everybody's comment, that at least I understand, nobody seems to be totally pleased with this. This is a very weak foundation. We need to roll up our sleeves, yes, but we need to build a better foundation on this particular resolution before we bring it. So why have another amendment? Because that's going to incite somebody else here in the horseshoe to maybe come up with another amendment, like me. I don't like the 10 majority votes, but I'll wait. I'll wait till it goes back to committee, and then we'll have that discussion in the right format. That's really where the nuts and bolts, where the rubber needs to meet the road. Not here in the horseshoe, but in the individual committee. So therefore, even though I do like Alderman Jettie's amendment, I think it's a little bit too early to try to attach this. Now is the time to put this resolution back on the burner and cook it a little bit more. And then when we get the recipe finalized, then we can have a big taste testing with our taxpayers and bring it out at that particular time. Something that we will all be proud of. But right now, why fix a board on the house when we're going to be taking it back? So I'm not going to support the amendment. Thank you.
So do you want to make a formal amendment? Alderman Jettie?
I thought I made
Oh,
a
you thought you
motion
did, okay.
that was
Sorry.
recommended by,
Yeah, we got off topic.
Yeah, he did do that.
Placing it in its entirety?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the motion before us. Is there further discussion? Alderman Govea.
Thank you. I just have a clarifying question. So we're voting to approve what is before us, and that does not include the potential provision that the mayor was bringing up at the beginning?
Well, you're not voting to approve it. You're
We're voting-
voting to amend the proposal before you in accordance with the draft received today.
Okay, so what's in front of us is what we're voting on.
Yes.
If what's in front of you is
Yes.
what was received today, you are not voting to approve it, you're just voting to be, that's the operative document.
We should ask him
We're voting to approve the
Alderman Jettie?
Jeff.
so, I don't know, would it be helpful? Do people need me to go through the amendments that have been made to the original document? Or does everybody already know what that is? So I won't waste your time.
So this will be
Any further
to
discussion?
approve the amendment.
Motion to amend.
Yeah.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien.
No.
Alderwoman Timmons.
Yes.
Alderman Thibodeau.
Yes.
Alderman Govea.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yes.
Alderman Senate.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman Tebow.
No.
Alderman Clee.
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire.
Yes.
12 yeas, 2 nays.
That motion carries. And Resolution 25-121 has been duly amended. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to make a motion to indefinitely postpone R-25-121 as amended and refer it back to committee.
How would you do that?
You can't do that. You can't do that.
No, I can't do that. Well, I can indefinitely postpone it, correct?
Or table it.
Yes, you can indefinitely postpone it, but then you can't send it back to committee.
No,
Yeah.
but then hopefully it can get, well, then let me amend my motion then.
Okay?
Would I be as a parliamentary inquiry, could I make a motion to send it back to the committee?
Yes.
Okay, then I would,
This has never gone to a committee. It's
didn't
always
go to
been
committee,
addressed by
yeah.
the
This
full
is your
board.
committee.
Oh,
But a motion to send it to any of the committees is in
okay.
order.
This has been here.
okay. Then I would like to make that motion that we send R-25-121 to a committee deemed appropriate by the president of the board for further discussion so that we can work this. In other words, where was this? And if I may speak to my motion.
Yes.
Was this invented in the closet? Maybe that's why we're so confused with this. Because, too many moving parts by too many people. Maybe if we did it the way our procedures and worked it through a committee, we would all probably have a better understanding of this and not be, so confused. So I'll leave my motion as it is.
Alderwoman Timmons.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm just a little confused with my colleague to the left. We already voted, it's not clear to the council, to send this back for revision, to look at it again. To move it to a committee, I don't quite understand the difference it would make. So,
May I explain?
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. My intention is, Alderman, this never saw a committee at all, It was probably authored by a member of the board and everything and brought up and was discussed. And it was like and I was out, if you remember, due to my illness. So maybe it was discussed during that time. But I didn't participate in it. That I can guarantee you. Because a lot of things that I don't like about it, I would have brought up. So, I think if we do it right, what my intention is, Alderman, if we put it back into a committee, then we can have this discussion. I think the thought of trying to get this onto the ballot this year is moving way too fast. It's like an escalator out of control. If it goes too fast, you're going to fall off. And I don't think we can get a good finished product to the people. Spending caps need to be well thought of. You got to look at the spatial aptitude of it, up and down, sideways, in and out, because this is going to cost the taxpayers some money, or it's going to cost them services. And it's going to cost us. You got to remember, we're an employer, one of the largest employers in the city. So we have a lot of responsibility to this.
Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Madam President. And all due respect to my colleague, and I understand what you're saying, and I think it was probably what, in your absence, the conversation that happened in your absence was we would do it here because there was so much input from so many of us that it would be easier for all of us to have this discussion as a whole, because we each did have an opinion. So we would work it out as a board, rather than to put it in a committee and then have it come back here, because I think that was what the concern was when it did get initiated here. It did come through the mayor as a suggestion and so on. And I think that's how it ended up here originally and so on. I do understand your wanting to go to a committee, and that makes a lot of sense. It truly does, but I think that's how it ended up with the full board. So just to bring you up to speed, that's how it did happen here. So that we could all kind of work on it and so on. And I think at that time, a lot of people had different comments and so on, and went back to legal, where they worked on it, and then it just kind of sat on the table until I believe someone asked to bring it back forward. So just bringing you up to speed. So, thank you.
Alderman O'Brien, did you want to respond
Yes,
to that?
in rebuttal, if I may, Madam President. And I thank the Alderman for bringing me up to speed. But the thing is, trying to choose my words. This is a big group. We're not going to satisfy everybody. That's why I like the committees. You can look at it and tackle each individual problems. Last time I went to a committee meeting, I chair a couple. All aldermen are invited. It's not like we exclude aldermen. So it doesn't have to be in this horseshoe. It could still be in the horseshoe, but at the committee level with people showing up. And unfortunately, I took ill, so I kind of missed it. But the thing is, if this makes me a newcomer, then let me tell you the truth. The discussions I heard tonight, this ain't working. It ain't working, folks. So take that from the newcomer. Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. I'm going to support the motion to send it back to committee. I think that it's a good idea. And just to add on to what my colleague from Ward 3 said, I think there was a couple of sides. So there were what you had mentioned, but also from what I remember, I did watch the meeting from March 10th. That's 2.5 hours of great television. There's the piece, the expediting piece, where we didn't want to put it in committee, then come back to the board, and that was going to waste time, and we were really trying to get this on the ballot for this year, even though we wouldn't even see this take effect until, I think, fiscal year 27, 28. Anyway, I'm going to support it. I think that, the committee setting is a little bit more informal. To my colleague at large point, everybody can come. You can write out amendments and ask a member of that committee to sponsor that amendment if you feel strongly about it. So yeah, I think that that's a good place for this to go. And since, at this point, I mean, if you were to forecast it, it's not going to hit the ballot anyway. So let's do it. Let's break it apart and see where it goes.
Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, I think I was thinking along similar lines. I think we had pretty significant meetings. They weren't even short or little ones. I mean, we had like a 4-hour one introducing this thing where it was gone over in pretty much detail. And I think the reason that there is a lot of changes to it is because we've done a lot of work on it. Maybe not all of us, but it was worked on by the full board, and we did very recently agree that we were going to work on it, and we had a meeting scheduled. We couldn't get all the staff that we needed, but that brought us to tonight. And so personally, I take issue with the idea that we would all be working collaboratively on something that was invented in a closet. I think we've been following full accountability and transparency with this. I think the people who came to heckle it were very much aware of what we were trying to do, even if they initially disagreed, maybe were persuaded by some of the points that the mayor made. I think this was done in good faith. I appreciate the committee model. I think if it wasn't noticed that it never went to committee, maybe a person's not as likely to actually authentically attend a committee. And if their position is very deep set that they're against this, as might have been stated this evening, I don't know that they will contribute positively, but I would be happily surprised. And I would rather it go to committee than just be indefinitely postponed or buried and we just continue on continuing on. As I pointed out earlier, most of us are actually up for re-election this term, and we do have to answer to, you know, people who are going to want to know what we're doing with their tax funding, how we're organizing our approach, and some of us may feel conscientiously we have to do something about this, and I would love to see them at that committee meeting.
Alderman Dowd?
Yeah, the reason it came to the full board was so that the actions could be taken to try and get it on the ballot. If we're not doing that now, the argument is, if you bring something to full board, you make amendments, you have no time to think about it. We have to act on it that night, and, which is the reason it's here. But if we're not going to act on it, even though I'm really concerned about what committee it might go back to, at the committee level, everybody can attend. You can make motions and amendments, and then you have time to think about them before the full board acts on them. You have time to hash them out, and it would also give us time to have people in the city government, you know, try to take into account all the things that were mentioned earlier. If we're not going to act on it tonight, I have no objection of it going back to committee, even though I'm sort of concerned about what committee it's going to go back to.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you. The previous speaker stole my thunder a little, and that was my question. I think when it was originally written, it was to go to Personnel and Personnel Administrative Affairs. And to the discussion, we decided to work on it as a board. I do agree with the fact that a smaller group is a little bit easier, and the committee setting is more set up for us to have some of those discussions and refine language and get it to a place where we're happy with it. I was going to suggest and hear what the board thinks about potentially a joint committee, if it were personnel and budget, that might cover kind of both bases.
And have enough people.
Alderman Clemmons?
Thank you, Madam President. So I have a question through you to Corporation Counsel.
Okay.
If this goes back to personnel and the personnel committee works on it, and let's say everything gets approved, but it's after the election but before the next term, would this go on, would that next term ending kill this, or would it go on to the ballot in 2027?
If my opinion, and there's no definitive answer to this because the situation has never arisen and no court has passed on it, but my opinion is if you get to the point where this board has finalized language and directed the city clerk to report it to the 3 state officials, then I think it would continue even if it goes into the next calendar year.
Okay.
Because this board would have taken its action to do that. Now, once a response is received from the 3 state officials, then this board, as then constituted, would have to finally vote to put it on the ballot.
Paul?
Okay, so you are saying that it is possible for this board to put it on the ballot in 2027?
Yes, and that would require a special election.
Or I mean, no, I mean the regular election in 2027.
State election.
Yeah. No,
Regular
No,
city election.
Municipal election.
the municipal election, yes, you can do that
Okay,
at the next municipal election.
Okay.
You could also do it in a special election within 60 days.
okay.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, if I could further, so I don't, I guess knowing the answer to that question, which was my concern, because my concern was I don't want us to do work that then ends up going nowhere. But if we can work on this, then, you know, I don't have a problem with it going to, back to personnel, but the only thing that I would say, you know, is again, trying to do this right. I also don't want to see it rushed to the end of the term, either. You know, so I don't know if like the suggestion that, Alderman Gouveia had made earlier that, you know, maybe it gets taken up by the next Board of Aldermen is a better idea. I know we've come a long way on this. Again, I have no problem continuing to work on it. I just don't feel that it's ready for prime time, but I'm not so sure that I'm going to endorse, though, sending it back, because, again, I think this is something that perhaps the next Board of Aldermen should tackle.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Madam President. So, first of all, I didn't mean to try to stifle debate earlier. I just saw no hands up before Alderman O'Brien spoke, so I thought we were getting ready to vote. With this, it really shouldn't go to committee at this point. We decided as a board it shouldn't go to a committee, that we should be deciding it as a team. You know, you can go to a committee meeting, but you can't vote, and I know you can push an amendment to other people, but at the end of the day, you don't have a vote whether it goes forward or not. I don't think it should go to personnel, I think it should go to budget, but if they want it in personnel, have at it, because I don't really want it, but I don't want it. Honestly, I think well, then it can go to personnel, that's fine. If that's what you think, you can have it, I don't want it. If that's your like, but it has budget in the title and there's money in it, so I assume most of it's budget. But Alderman O'Brien had it right the first time, indefinitely postpone it. That's what we should be doing with it. Because if we've been rushing this thing, that like people are saying, we're awful at rushing things, because this thing's been out there for a while now. So I don't think we're rushing it, I just don't think we're doing a good job with it. So by the time we actually do something, the new board's coming in, and there's only 3 guaranteed spots here, and that's Alderman O'Brien, Alderman Clemmons, and Alderman Wilshire. So they can work on it all they want next time, whether the rest of us are here or not, right?
Thank you.
Because I don't think we should be deciding for the next board. And that's what's going to happen, because it's going to get right to the end, we're going to have other public hearings, and we're not going to get it into this election. There's no way. Not the rate we're going, and if it goes back to committee, and it's going to have to, if it has to touch 2 committees and another public hearing, it should be left for the other board. It should be postponed indefinitely. That's what I would do if we didn't have a motion to table it or to send it back to committee, even though it's not back to anything. There was no committee originally, so that's my thoughts on it.
Alderman Lopez?
I was going to say, I don't have a crystal ball despite appearances, but I was pretty sure, it's a joke. I was pretty sure somebody was going to say, if we don't get it done on this ballot, we don't want to vote for it because it would affect the next legislative body. So I think probably we should still do the work on it, but if it doesn't get onto the ballot this year, it's going to have to be, if it's going to survive. I know Attorney Bolton has said legislatively it could be done, but I think if it's going to get approved by the board here, it probably will have to just wait until the new board is sworn in. I still think it's definitely going to be a major election item, because I think people were wondering you know, are we trying to fix this? Are we not trying to fix this? Are we spending our money? And I think we're still subject to the same kind of misinformation or confusion that we always get with how are we spending money, or is money being hidden, all of that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, that's just how elections are. That's the work we have to do. And being incumbents and saying to our constituents, this is what the truth is. This is what we've been working on. Nobody's trying to buy Pennachuck. It's a person bought property, and, you know, Pennachuck provides water. So that's our job, and those of us who are willing to do it, we're gonna have to do it regardless of whether we do it this way. But I do think that this board really needs to diligently work on how we approach this issue. And I don't think the next couple of years are gonna get any better. And I still think we still need to look at replacing the spending cap with something that's a little bit more functional for the city.
Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. So through you to Corporation Counsel, you know, Alderman O'Brien's idea about, you know, overriding with a simple majority, is that permissible on the state enabling legislation?
It has to be by some supermajority.
Okay. So, so you know, the other only new idea I've heard tonight expressed is the mayor's concern about, you know, what he raised about the possibility of the state or the federal government, you know, clawing back money in that situation. I'm kind of disappointed. You know, we postponed our previously scheduled meeting because the staff couldn't be here, and now they're all here, and they've been listening to us have this wonderful debate, which I'm sure is very entertaining to them. But I feel kind of bad that none of them has had a chance to say anything about what we're discussing tonight. And I don't know, you know, if there's a way to invite any of them to contribute anything that they feel is pertinent to the debate that we're having. You know, personally, I think the current spending cap legislation, you know, is problematic. You know, I've heard the mayor complain about it. I've heard, you know, most of us aldermen complain about it. You know, it's been to court several times. There've been complaints about the decisions the court has made. The legislature's got involved. There are complaints about that. You know, I thought that, you know, this legislation, which, you know, Alderman Clemmons and the mayor worked on, and Attorney Bolton, I thought, did a wonderful job, you know, drafting the initial legislation. We talked about it. We made several changes to it, and we talked about several changes. We made some. Tonight, we've made some more. You know, I think we've, you know, we've come up with something which is much better than the current legislation. But, you know, I've never one to discourage, you know, further study and discussion. But I would, I don't know if it's permissible, Madam President, but I would like to give the staff people who have come here an opportunity to contribute if they want to.
I can ask.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Griffin or Mr. Cummings, do either of you have any input?
Sure. John Griffin, CFO, for now. I've given a lot of thought to this particular resolution and legislation, and notwithstanding what the mayor and Attorney Bolton brought up, which is looks like complete devastation at the federal and possibly state level. If I was going to speak more aggressively, and I would much appreciate an invite to the next Budget Review Committee or the Personnel Administrative Affairs to talk about it, it's the local revenue that I'm very, very worried about. As I mentioned to you folks in the past, and you've studied very hard, we file our tax information after the budget, after we know what the revenue is, surplus, after we know previous year's appropriations not spent. You kind of take that away when you look at a tax cap, because revenue is everything. You've put constraints on the total tax bill to include the county tax and the swept, the kind of make-believe state tax amount that's on the tax bill. So as I mentioned the last time we met, you're really constraining your growth on like a fraction. Local revenue with regard to education and local revenue with regard to municipal. And even if you use a 4% CPIU or something else, you're just not going to come anywhere close to what you've embedded in the city's cost structure. So the next meeting, I'd be happy to attend. You're going to have an override like every year, and I don't think that's what you want. The numbers don't get any better. The good news about this is it starts off every year anew with the information from the DRA. But I wouldn't want to be in a situation for you folks that you're literally, when you receive the mayor's budget, that you know you're 6 million short, you're 10 million short, what have you. And even if you took a modest increase of 4%, on our current budget, it's like $14 million. And the last 2 years, you've appropriated $21 million and $20 million because, as the mayor so eloquently stated, you have these budget busters. School department, what happens if a runaway train of special education needs, right? They're very concerned. Transportation, they negotiate a one-year deal. And first student's the only game in town. Other items like changes to workers' comp. Director Cummings and his team have basically said you're looking at 10% increases in health care for the foreseeable future. And now, given what I think is probably going to happen at the federal level, I think the local folks, and we're self-insured, we're going to be charged more for everything. I'm trying to read a lot because I'm going to have Medicare soon, but it's not a pretty sight. So I would recommend you take your time, have a committee, look at a bunch of alternatives, but whatever it is, you probably want something where the cap is like $1 million away or a couple of $1 million away, and then you decide, like you've done every year I've been here, what do you want to spend and what don't you? But to have what you have now, which is just a daunting review of $6, $7, $10 million, and I'll bring these exhibits in the next meeting. I have them now, but I think it would take you, it would kind of steal the show, so to speak. But where do you begin? And then it's like, do we want the override to be 7 million or do we want it to be 9 million? And that's kind of what your debate is since I've been here. You took a lot of time in the budget. You kind of saw what the number was, and notwithstanding the $33 million that we have on the current cap, right? As Alderman Sullivan, 33 million. We appropriated 20 million of bonds. Now we have 13. And then over the last few meetings, you appropriated another 3 or 4 million. So now you're under 10. But we all say that's a problem, but it probably was a problem, as Alderman O'Brien said, back in 1993 and 94. And then when I came on board in 2010, it was like ordinanceized. It was like, okay, this doesn't work for this, so we're going to change it by your ordinance. This doesn't work for that. Not sure what the solution is, but those are my comments, Madam President, and the rest of the board. And taking a look at, begin with the end in mind, right? Like, what is it that you want to constrain the spending? I struggled with trying to calculate the new growth. Do I multiply that by the increase in the local education, local municipal? Do I bring the swept in there? Do I, the complete tax rate? And as the mayor indicated and Attorney Bolton, if there's a 20% increase in the county tax, that's going to be part of the total tax. You can do all you want to constrain the other two items, but people are going to remember that that portion of the bill went up 20%. Happy to take any questions, but I want to tell you that I'll be back. This is an important decision you're making, and I'll be willing to put the time in. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Alderman Jettie, did you have a question of Mr. Griffin?
Yes, if I
Okay.
could. So am I understanding you correctly? It sounds to me like you're saying that you don't think this would be an improvement over what we have, and it sounds like you're also saying that what we have is not good, so maybe what we ought to be doing is considering repealing the spending cap that we have.
Madam President, if I may, studying what you've proposed here, it's going to be very difficult to operate where you would even have a surplus, ever. And you're going to be at that cap level just to operate. Furthermore, you're going to need overrides. What you have now was our interpretation. The good news is we've been consistent in the application. Only once did we need what Attorney Bolton said was the exemption of debt. But that was a tough decision for all of you. You had to exempt debt because you knew that either you did it, as the mayor indicated, you either did it last year or you're going to do it this year. You have room. You don't worry about it. It's a big number. You're applying the index to the total budget, not a fraction of the tax base. You work diligently. Whether it's 30 million over or 30 million under or 20 million under, you still look like you were operating very concerning. And it got down to the last couple of workers of public health and another over here and all of that. So I'd say neither one works. I'm not sure if you need a tax cap or a spending cap, but whatever it is, you have to have something that's just a little bit of tension, not 33 million over, not 10 under. Because it'd be terrible, like if I was in your shoe a couple of years from now and you come in, you got, we have a $14 million budget proposal at 4%, certainly not enough, but you're 9 million over the cap. And then you're like, okay. You can't cut 9 million. You can't cut probably $1 million out of that. And the daunting, following the federal stuff and the state stuff, I always ask Megan Karen, great chief of staff of the mayor, Megan, what's happening? Can we count this revenue that we're getting? When I first started here, we got $36 million in state adequacy aid. Then they started adding the bells and whistles. Now we're going to go from 59 last year to 64. Is that guaranteed? That's part of that $100 million worth of revenue. Worried about the revenue, even local, right? Treasurer in right now, we $5 million of interest income. If the interest rates come down like they're projected to 2%, then you're chasing the difference between 5 and 2, right? Automatic. So those local revenues may go up or down depending upon how things are. The two biggest things in financial services are interest income and motor vehicle registrations. So I'd say it's time to look for a change. You may end up with recommending you don't have anything. And that might be the result you get, so you're not chasing this fictitious number that is somewhat meaningless. Hopefully that's kind of where I look at it.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Madam President. The meeting that we had, that wonderful 2-hour meeting that we had the presentation, I remember the conversation that started with we would have to have an override almost every time. And I walked away from that meeting shaking my head, saying I couldn't vote for anything that would start us with an override from the get-go. And hearing Mr. Griffin repeat that tells me that either we have to work very diligently on this and put in all kinds of changes that say no override, at least to start with. I know we put provisions that we would, build in 5 allowable, but we're going to start with, let's cut one out right away, and now we have 4 more left. we can't say to the taxpayers, we're going to build a budget and automatically start with an override. I have a problem with that. I may have issues with the spending cap that doesn't allow for an override, only allows for exemptions or exclusions or whatever we want to call those, but I don't like something that we have to start with an override. So whether we send it back to, send it to a committee to really work on it, which I don't think we could finish by the end of the year, but maybe create some bones for the next administration. I really think we should be working on the spending cap, not trying to create this tax cap, because I don't think the tax cap is going to work. And I think we're kind of wasting our time working on a tax cap. I think we should, if we're going to do something, I think we should be recreating or working on the spending cap. So I'm not sure I would send it to committee. I think I'd rather see this go by the wayside and work on a spending cap. But thank you.
Did you have a question for Director Griffin?
Not a question, just a comment.
Okay.
Thank you. And with thanks to CFO Griffin, that broad overview summary that he gave, I think gives us a lot more to chew on. I think that opens up a lot more considerations, more questions to ask. And with that in mind, I wasn't quite sure where I stood on referring it to committee. But with that in mind, and with acknowledgement to Alderman Lopez's point that we have taken on the commitment to roll up our sleeves and do the work, I would support sending this to committee with the understanding that CFO Griffin would be joining us for that committee meeting, because I think he just laid out on the table the opportunity for us to ask the tough questions and to really dive into this the way that we need to. I am kind of getting the sense, just looking around the room, that maybe that's not a conversation anybody's really rearing to start at 9 o'clock at night, but I mean, if that's the appetite of the board, that's fine too. But with that being the current question on the table, I will vote to support sending it back, well, sending it for the first time.
To a committee. Director Cummings, did you have anything to, all right, Treasurer Enright, did you have anything you want to bring up this evening?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the motion is to refer R25-121 to the Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee, is that?
Well,
Okay.
point of order, Madam President, I did not designate a specific committee. I have no objections if that's the committee you so wish. It seems to have been born there at one point, so I'm not objecting.
Okay.
It's just I left it in a way
Right.
ambiguous, up to you if
Yeah,
you
well,
could
that's
find it
what I was
better.
asking, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank
Alderman-
you, Madam President.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, typically, things that have to do with amending the charter go to Personnel and Administrative Affairs.
That's where I would be inclined to send it. Okay. That's what we'll do. We'll send it to Personnel Administrative Affairs. Do you want to take a vote on that? Yes.
Yes.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien.
Yes.
Alderwoman Timmons.
Yes.
Alderman Thibodeau.
Yes.
Alderman Govea.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons.
No.
Alderman Senate.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman Tebow.
No.
Alderman Clee.
No?
Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire.
Yes.
11 yeas, 3 nays.
That motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion that the July 22nd, 2025 special meeting of the Board of Aldermen be adjourned by roll call.
Motion is to adjourn. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien.
Yes.
Alderwoman Timmons.
Yes.
Alderman Thibodeau.
Yes.
Alderman Govea.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yes.
Alderman Senate.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman Tebow.
No.
Alderman Clee.
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire.
Yes.
13 yeas, 1 nay.
That motion carries, and we are adjourned at 8:57 PM. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. So-
Good night.
Do I have to know the name?
Oh, yeah, I can't wait.